Hey guys, tonight we're going to do something a little different. We're going to step back in time, about 800 years or so, and try to make it as a medieval knight. We'll feel the weight of the armor, hear the clash of steel, and most importantly, taste the food. Spoiler alert, it's not the dragons or the epic sword fights that are most likely to get you. It's the food. Honestly, you might not survive your first official meal. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop your city and the current time in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see where our little history community is spread out across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The dream always starts the same way. You're seated at the high table, the wood dark and polished with age, catching the flickering, orange light of 100 torches. The great hall buzzes with the murmur of 100 conversations, the clatter of silver on pewter, and the triumphant sound of a lute played by a minstrel in the corner. You're wearing velvet, a deep blue that signifies your favor with the king, who sits just a few seats down, laughing heartily at some jest. The table groans under the weight of the feast. There's a whole roasted boar, its skin crackling and glistening, an apple stuffed in its mouth. There are swans, artfully reassembled with their feathers after cooking, looking as if they might glide off the platter. Pies, golden and steaming, promise fillings of venison, lark, and spices from the faraway east. The wine in your goblet is a deep, rich red, and it warms you from the inside out. You reach for a piece of tender meat, your fingers brushing against the fine linen, the dream of knighthood made real. This is it. This is the reward. This is what you've been fighting for. Oi, get that bucket of slop to the pigs before it grows legs and walks there itself. A rough voice shatters the illusion. The scent of roasted boar is replaced by the smell of boiling turnips and wood smoke. You blink, your eyes adjusting to the dim, steamy chaos of the castle kitchen. You're not in velvet, you're in a coarse, grease-stained tunic. You're not at the high table, you're standing by a bubbling cauldron, a long wooden spoon in your hand. You are not a knight. Not yet, you're a boy, a page, maybe a kitchen hand, and your reality is this cauldron. Inside is your dinner, and breakfast, and probably tomorrow's lunch. It's pottage, bay thick, grayish-brown stew of whatever was available. You can see bits of barley, some sad-looking carrots, and a whole lot of onion. It smells faintly of boiled vegetables, and well dampness. This is the fuel that runs the lower levels of the castle, the stuff that keeps the servants, the grooms, and the aspiring knights like you on their feet. It's nutritious in the most basic sense of the word, but it lacks any semblance of joy. The head cook, a mountain of a man named Thomas with a permanently flour-dusted beard, glares at you. You quickly grab the bucket he pointed to and begin to ladle out the leftovers from another pot, the really old stuff for the swine. As you work, you watch the hierarchy of the castle play out in its food. A servant rushes past with a silver platter laden with the remnants from the Lord's table. You see half-eaten bread, gnawed on ribs, and even a piece of that glorious swan. But it's not for you. It's not even for the dogs. It's for the almoner, the church official who distributes the high table leftovers to the poor at the castle gates. A noble gesture, to be sure. Here's a little detail you wouldn't know until you saw it. The plates used by the high nobility were often not plates at all. They were called trenchers thick, flat slabs of stale bread. They would absorb the juices and gravies from the meat, and after the meal, these gravy-soaked bread plates were a desirable charitable gift for the hungry. You see a boy scraping them into a separate basket, and a pang of jealousy hits you. Even the Lord's garbage looks more appetizing than your pottage. You finish your task and finally get your own bowl of the grey stew, along with a hunk of dark, heavy bread. You find a spot on a crate in the corner, away from the hustle. As you eat, you watch the actual night swagger through the courtyard. They are loud, confident, and seem to exist in a different world. You dream of joining them, of earning your spurs and your seat at the feast. But the gap between your world and theirs feels immense, a chasm as wide as the castle moat. Historians are still debating just how rigid the social ladder was. Was it truly possible for a boy from the kitchens, sustained by pottage, to rise and become a knight feasting on swan? Or was that just a story, a fantasy told to keep boys like you stirring the pot and dreaming you chew on the tough, sour bread? And you can't help but wonder. The taste of the dream feast is still on your tongue, a ghostly flavor that makes the reality of your meal taste all the more bland. Years pass, marked not by calendars, but by the calluses on your hands and the growing strength in your shoulders. The pottage, for all its blandness, has done its job. You've grown taller, stronger, and you've managed to catch the eye of a knight, a grizzled veteran named Sir Gerard. You are now a squire. This is a monumental step up. Your world is no longer the steamy kitchen, but the armory, the training yard, and the stables. The air smells different here. It's a mix of oiled leather, sharpening steel, horse sweat, and honest-to-goodness hard work. Your days are a blur of frantic, focused activity. You're up before the sun, not to stir a pot, but to tend to Sir Gerard's most prized possession, his destrier, his warhorse. This beast, a mountain of muscle and controlled fury, eats better than you do. You feed it oats and good hay, curry its coat until it shines, and check its hooves for stones. You whisper to it in the quiet of the morning, a bond forming between you and the animal you might one day ride into battle. This isn't just a chore, it's a sacred trust. Then it's on to the armor. Sir Gerard's mail hauberk, a shirt of thousands of interlinked iron rings, needs constant care. You spend hours tumbling it in a barrel of sand and vinegar to scour off the rust, the rhythmic grinding sound a constant backdrop to your life. You polish his helmet, his greaves, his gauntlets, until you can see your own tired reflection in the steel. You are the reason he shines on the tournament field. You are the unseen labor behind the gleam of chivalry. The real work happens in the afternoon, in the training yard. Sir Gerard is a demanding teacher. You learn to manage a shield, to absorb the jarring impact of a wooden practice sword. You learn footwork, balance, and how to swing a blade without leaving yourself fatally exposed. He doesn't praise you. Praise is for minstrel songs. He corrects you, sharply and immediately. Your guard is low. Move your feet, boy. They aren't roots. Again, the bruises you collect are just part of the curriculum, and what of the food that fuels this grueling existence? Is it the swan feast from your dreams? Not even close. But it is, you must admit, an improvement. The pottage is still a staple, but now it often contains shreds of stringy boiled beef or mutton. A small victory. The real difference, however, is the bread. You now receive what's known as a squire's loaf. It's a step above the rock-hard, dark rye bread of the lower servants. It's made from a mix of wheat and rye, making it lighter in color and slightly less dense. It's still a world away from the Lord's bread, the pain main or pain de main, which was made from the finest, sifted white flour. But your loaf is substantial. It has heft. It's the kind of bread you can gnaw on for a while. Its earthy flavor a welcome partner to a sliver of cheese or a piece of salted fish. Here's a funny little detail. The quality and type of bread you were given was one of the most visible, everyday markers of your exact rank within the castle's social pyramid. You could literally tell someone's status by the color of their carbs. You eat your meals in a noisy hall with the other squires and men at arms. The atmosphere is boisterous and competitive. Stories are swapped, boasts are made, and fights occasionally break out over a perceived slight or an extra piece of bread. You eat quickly, because there's always more work to be done. You also start drinking ale. It's small beer, a weak, low-alcohol brew, but it's safer than the often questionable water and has more calories to get you through the day. Your relationship with Sir Gerard is complex. Some days, He is the mentor you've always wanted, taking the time to show you the subtle flick of the wrist that can disarm an opponent. In these moments, you feel a powerful bond of loyalty. On other days, he is just a tired, aching man, short-tempered from an old wound, who sees you as little more than a pair of hands to unbuckle his armor. Historians are still very much in debate about the true nature of the squire-knight relationship. Was it a noble mentorship, a kind of surrogate fatherhood paving the way for the next generation of warriors, or was it often a brutally pragmatic apprenticeship, where the squire was little more than a valet and a sparring dummy looking at Sir Gerard's weary face as you pull off his sweat-soaked gambeson? You suspect the truth lies somewhere uncomfortably in the middle. As you lie on your straw pallet at night, every muscle in your body humming with exhaustion, the dream of the feast feels more distant but also more attainable. The path is clearer now. It is a path paved not with velvet and silver, but with rust, horsehire, and the dense chewy crumb of a squire's loaf. The day finally comes when you step out of the squire's hall and into the world of the nobility, not as a servant, but as an observer. Sir Gerard is in good spirits, his tournament winnings having put him in the Lord's favor. He has been invited to a private dinner in the Solar, the Lord's personal living quarters, and for some reason, perhaps a whim, perhaps a reward for how well you polished his helm, he decides you'll attend him. Not to eat, of course, but to serve his cup. To be present, it might as well be an invitation to the moon. The Solar is a world away from the great hall's boisterous energy. This is a smaller, more intimate space. Rich tapestries hang on the stone walls, their woven scenes of hunts and battles absorbing the sound and giving the room a hushed, conspiratorial feel. The air smells of beeswax from the expensive candles, spiced wine, and the subtle, clean scent of power. A fire crackles in a large, ornate hearth, casting dancing shadows that make the woven figures on the walls seem to move. The Lord and his lady are there, along with a visiting dignitary and a handful of other high-ranking knights, including Sir Gerard. You stand behind your master's chair, your heart thumping a nervous rhythm against your ribs. You thought you understood the castle's hierarchy, but here, in this room, you feel its true weight. It's in the way the Lord doesn't have to raise his voice to be obeyed, in the practiced elegance of the lady's gestures, in the deference shown by even a proud man like Sir Gerard. And then, the food begins to arrive. This is not the mass-produced fare of the Great Hall feast. This is bespoke dining. The servants move with a silent, practiced efficiency that makes the kitchen staff seem like a herd of clumsy cattle. The first course is a sotel tea, a subtlety. It's a stunning sculpture made of sugar paste, depicting a castle under siege, so intricate you can't believe it's meant to be eaten. It's not just food, it's a conversation piece, a display of wealth and the skill of the Lord's personal cook. The dishes that follow are a parade of sensory overload. There's no single groaning table here. Instead, food arrives in waves or messes, with several dishes per course. You see a clear, amber-colored broth with delicate herbs floating in it, served not in a bowl but in a cup. There are slices of venison sitting in a deep purple sauce, made from reed wine and mulberries. There are lampreys, an eel-like fish considered a great delicacy, cooked in a thick, spicy gravy. Here's a little tidbit for you. These elaborate sauces weren't just for flavor. In an age before refrigeration, strong spices like cloves, cinnamon, and pepper, along with vinegar and wine, were crucial for masking the taste of meat that was, well, on the verge of turning. They were the original flavor enhancers and preservatives, all in one. You watch, mesmerized, as the diners eat. They use knives and spoons, but forks are still a bizarre, for a novelty, viewed with suspicion. Mostly, they use their fingers, delicately plucking morsels, undipping them into shared salt cellars. The bread here is stark white, fluffy, and cut into neat squares. They use it to scoop up the rich sauces, a far cry from the stale trenchers of the main hall. Sir Gerard, to his credit, seems to remember you're there. He discreetly passes you a small piece of the white bread HES used to wipe his plate, nodding for you to eat it. You tuck it away in your tunic, a secret treasure. The wine they drink is different too. It's not the watered-down ale you're used to. It's brought in a silver ewer, and you catch its fragrant aroma as you refill Serger Ard's goblet. It smells of fruit and sun in foreign lands. As the meal winds down, the conversation, which has been a low hum of politics and gossip, turns to the cost of a recent military campaign. The Lord casually mentions the price of grain, the expense of armor, the wages for the men at arms. It's a stark reminder that everything you've just witnessed, the tapestries, the spices, the sugar paste castle, is funded by the cold, hard calculus of the estate's economy. The luxury in this room is directly proportional to the hardship outside it. Historians have long debated the precise purpose of such extravagant meals. Were they simply about sustenance and pleasure, or were they a calculated performance of power, a way for the Lord to display his wealth, secure the loyalty of his key vassals, and intimidate his rivals, all without raising a single sword? Watching the visiting dignitary's eyes widen at the sight of the sugar castle, you're pretty sure you know the answer. Later that night, long after you've unburdened Serger Ard of his finery, you lie on your pallet and finally eat the piece of bread he gave you. It's soft, almost sweet, and soaked in the ghost of that rich, savory sauce. It dissolves on your tongue, a fleeting taste of a world you now know exists. The dream feast feels less like a fantasy and more like a destination. You just have to figure out how to get your own invitation. The tournament is a roaring success. Serger Ard, with you as his ever-present shadow, bests 3 opponents, his lance shattering spectacularly against their shields. The Lord is pleased, the crowd is ecstatic, and the air is thick with the promise of celebration. This, you feel, is it, the culmination of all your hard work. And then it happens. In a small, unceremonious gathering in the castle chapel, with a handful of other squires who have also proven their worth, you kneel. Serger Ard taps you on each shoulder with the flat of his sword, muttering the traditional words. You rise, not as a boy, but as Sir You, a knight. You feel a dizzying mix of pride, disbelief, and sheer terror. You've reached the summit you've been climbing your whole life. You imagine the doors of the solar swinging open, a seat at the high table prepared just for you, a personal servant handing you a goblet of that fine, fragrant wine. The reality, however, is a swift and brutal come down. You're directed not to the great hall for a feast, but to a smaller, secondary hall you've never been in before. It's crowded, noisy, and filled with the lowest-ranking knights, the newly dubbed like yourself, the landless, the ones whose armor is a little more dented, whose tunics are a little more faded. These are the household knights, men who depend entirely on the Lord for their keep, and you are now one of them. A long trestle table has been set up, and you find a space on a hard wooden bench between a grim-faced man with a broken nose and a young knight who looks as bewildered as you feel. There are no tapestries on these walls, no beeswax candles. The only light comes from smoky tallow lamps that make the room feel gloomy and close. And then the food arrives. It's served unceremoniously on pewter platters, slammed down on the table for everyone to share. There is no swan, no venison, no sugar paste subtleties. Before you is a large dish of peas pottage. It's a thick, porridge-like stew made from dried peas, boiled into a mush. To be fair, it's a step up from the watery vegetable pottage of your kitchen days. It's thicker, more substantial, and you can see flecks of salted pork mixed in, providing a welcome burst of savory flavor. But still, it's a bowl of mush. This is your celebratory meal. Alongside it is bread, the same squire's loaf you've been eating for years, a dense, brownish loaf from which you hack off a chunk with your own dagger. There's a communal block of hard, salty cheese, already being fiercely contested by the men further down the table. To drink, there's ale. Not the fine wine of the Lord's solar, not even the decent stuff served in the great hall, but the same weak, cloudy small beer that was the staple of the squire's table. You eat in a sort of daze. The reality of your new station is sinking in with every spoonful of bland, salty pea mush. You are a knight, yes. You have the title, the right to carry a sword, and the expectation to die for your lord. But you are at the very bottom of the nightly food chain. You look around at the other men. They eat with a grim, practiced efficiency, wasting no time on pleasantries. They are not feasting, they are refueling. Here's a small, perhaps depressing, detail of medieval life. Social mobility was a double-edged sword. You could rise, but your new rank didn't automatically grant you the lifestyle you associated with it. Becoming a knight was like getting a promotion to a junior management position in a massive corporation. You have a new title, new responsibilities, but you're still eating in the company cafeteria, not the executive dining room. The real perks are reserved for the senior partners, the landed knights, the barons, the lord himself. The man with the broken nose grunts, noticing your bewildered expression. First day, he asks, not unkindly. You nod, your mouth full of the dense bread. He gives a short, humorless laugh. Get used to it. The poets sing of glory. The quartermaster pays in beans. He gestures with his thumb toward the mush. This is what keeps us in the saddle. Not so on. It's a lesson in pure pragmatism. The Lord has a budget. He has dozens, perhaps hundreds, of men like you to feed. He can't afford to give everyone venison and fine wine every night. He needs to provide calories, protein, and carbs in the most cost-effective way possible. And that way is pease pottage, salted meat, bread, and ale. It's a soldier's ration, designed for function, not for pleasure. Historians are still piecing together the exact pay scales for different ranks of knights, but it's clear that for many, their compensation was little more than room and board. And the quality of that board was a matter of strict economic calculation. Was this a deliberate strategy to keep lower-ranking knights humble and dependent, or just a simple, unavoidable reality of medieval logistics as you scrape the last of the pottage from your bowl? You suspect it's a bit of both. The dream of the feast has vanished, but it's been deferred, pushed further into a future. You now realize you have to earn all over again. The initial disappointment of your first nightly meal soon hardens into a routine. Your new life isn't one of constant tournaments, unglorious charges. It's one of duty, and for a household knight with no land to his name, that duty is often mind-numbingly dull. You are assigned to the castle garrison. This means your primary job is simply being there. Your days are structured by the tolling of the chapel bell, marking the hours for watch duty on the cold, windswept battlements. You patrol the same stretch of stone wall, looking out at the same unchanging landscape of fields and woods, until every tree and rock is etched into your memory. You practice in the yard with the other knights, the clang of sword on shield, a familiar rhythm. You stand guard at the gate, observing the endless procession of carts, merchants, and peasants. It's a life of waiting, waiting for a war that may never come, waiting for a chance to prove yourself, waiting for something, anything, to happen. And this life of waiting is fueled by a diet of profound and unshakable monotony. The pease pottage of your first night was not a special occasion. It was the beginning of a pattern. The cornerstone of your diet is bread, not the squire's loaf, but something a grade rougher. It's called maslin bread, a heavy, dark loaf made from a mixture of wheat and rye, often with other grains like barley or oats thrown in. It's dense, slightly sour, and you eat a lot of it, the constant companion to every meal. The protein comes primarily into form salted meat and salted fish. The great hall of the castle has a storeroom that smells perpetually of salt and preservation. You see barrels of salted pork and beef, the meated ark, unappetizing color. You see stacks of dried and salted cod, stiff as wooden planks. This is the food of foresight. It's what allows a castle to withstand a siege, to feed its people through a long winter. It's a marvel of medieval logistics, but a nightmare for the palate. The meat has to be soaked for hours to draw out the excess salt, and even then, it's tough and stringy. The fish is no better. Boiled or thrown into a pottage, it fills you up, but it offers no delight. Your other constant companion is cheese. Not the soft, creamy cheeses you might imagine, but hard, aged, intensely salty cheese. It's another food designed for longevity. You learn to hack off a wedge with your dagger and gnaw on it, its sharp flavor a welcome. If aggressive, break from the blandness of everything else. It's a good source of fattened protein, perfect for carrying in a saddlebag on a long patrol. Here's a little historical morsel for you. These hard cheeses were so durable and valuable. They were sometimes used as a form of currency or to pay rent. You're literally eating money. Fresh vegetables are a rarity, a seasonal treat. In the summer, you might get some onions, leeks, or cabbage thrown into the pottage, which is a cause for minor celebration. Fresh fruit is almost unheard of, unless you count the wild berries you might find while on patrol. For the most part, your diet is a repeating cycle of salty, preserved, and starchy. Salted beef on Monday, salted cod on Tuesday, peas pottage with bacon on Wednesday, peas pottage with bacon on Wednesday, and so on, week after unchanging week. It's food that speaks not of joy or celebration, but of grim necessity, and it takes a toll. You feel constantly thirsty from all the salt. Your teeth ache from the effort of chewing the tough bread and meat. You start to understand why the older knights are so surly. A lifetime of this food would make anyone grim. Historians often debate the psychological impact of such a monotonous diet on a warrior class. Did this constant, low-grade hardship make them tougher, more resilient soldiers, accustomed to deprivation, or did it contribute to the short tempers, the brawling, and the thirst for the spoils of war, which promised a rare chance at luxurious food and drink standing on the battlements, chewing on a piece of hard cheese while the wind whips at your cloak? You can see both sides of the argument. The food grinds you down, but it also fuels a desperate hunger for something better. Every now and then, the tantalizing smell wafts up from the Lord's kitchens below, the scent of roasting meat, of baking bread, of spices. It's a reminder of that other world, the world of the solar, which feels more distant than ever. You are a knight, a protector of this castle, a member of the Vival Recorder. But as you sit down to yet another meal of dark bread and salted fish, you feel more like a cog in a great stone machine, fed just enough of the right fuel to keep you turning. The waiting finally ends. A herald arrives, his horse lathered in sweat, bearing a summons from the king. A rival duke has laid claim to a stretch of valuable border territory, and your lord is commanded to muster his forces and march to war. A current of nervous energy electrifies the castle. The monotony is shattered. The smithy's fires burn day and night, the air filled with the constant ring of hammers on anvils. Armor is repaired, horses are showed, and swords are given a fresh, lethal edge. This is the moment. This is your chance to trade the soul-crushing boredom of garrison duty for the glory you've read about in romances. But as the preparations intensify, you begin to see a side of warfare the minstrels never sing about: logistics. And at the heart of logistics is food. An army, as the old saying goes, marches on its stomach. And you're about to discover just how precarious that stomach is. You watch as the quartermaster and his clerks, looking stressed and overworked, supervise the loading of the baggage train. This is the lifeblood of the army, a long, slow-moving procession of wagons and pack animals. You see them loading in enormous sacks of flour and oats, barrels of salted meat and fish, and countless casks of ale. It looks like an immense amount of food, enough to feed a city. But then you do the math. Your lord is marching with 200 knights, twice as many men at arms, 100 archers, and all their servants and attendants. That's nearly 1,000 mouths to feed every single day. Suddenly, the mountain of supplies looks terrifyingly small. You learn that this baggage train is your lifeline. Everything you eat for the foreseeable future will come from these wagons. But this lifeline is incredibly vulnerable. It's slow. A heavily laden wagon drawn by oxen can only cover a few miles a day, especially on the poor quality roads that crisscross the countryside. This means the army can only move as fast as its slowest wagon. It's a constant source of tension between the commanders, who want speed, and the quartermasters, who know that to abandon the supply train is to condemn the army to starvation. The baggage train is also a magnet for trouble. It's the soft, juicy target for any enemy raiding party. A few dozen well-placed horsemen could swoop in, overwhelm the guards, burn the wagons, and effectively cripple your entire army without ever engaging in a major battle. The fear of this happening is a constant, unspoken anxiety among the veteran soldiers. Here is a curious detail of medieval campaigning because of these logistical challenges. Wars were intensely seasonal. Campaigns were almost always fought in the late spring and summer, after the spring planting and before the autumn harvest. This was when the weather was best, the roads were most passable, and crucially, there was forage available for the thousands of horses that were the backbone of any army. Trying to campaign in winter was a recipe for disaster, a slow death by starvation and frostbite. As you prepare your own gear, you pack your personal rations. You have a small leather satchel containing a block of that hard, salty cheese, a string of dried sausages, and a small bag of hardtack. Hardtack is the infamous soldier's bread. It's a simple biscuit made from flour, water, and sometimes a little salt, baked multiple times until it's as hard as a rock and almost completely devoid of moisture. It's designed to last for months, if not years, without spoiling. It's also notoriously difficult to eat. You can't just bite into it, unless you want to lose a tooth. The standard method is to soak it in water, ale, or soup until it softens into a palatable mush. It's not food, it's a survival tool. The night before you march, the mood is a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. There's a final, substantial meal in the hall. The Lord has been generous. The pottage is thick with meat, the ale is strong, and there's an extra ration of bread for everyone. It feels like a last supper. Sir Gerard, your old mentor, finds you checking the straps on your saddle. He claps a hand on your shoulder. "See those wagons," he says, nodding his head toward the bustling courtyard. "Never get too far from them. A sword can protect you from the enemy in front, but an empty belly will kill you from within." Historians are perpetually fascinated by the logistical feats of medieval armies. How did they manage to feed and supply thousands of men in a pre-industrial world? The truth is, often they didn't, or at least, not very well. The science of supply was a mix of careful planning, hopeful guesswork, and, when all else failed, brutal pragmatism. There's a continuing debate about whether the constant supply shortages were a bug, or a feature of medieval warfare, a problem to be solved, or an accepted reality that shaped the very nature of how wars were fought. Looking at the fragile line of wagons, you pray the quartermaster did his sums correctly. Your life may depend on it. The gates of the castle swing open, and the army snakes out onto the road. The initial thrill of the march, the sight of the banners snapping in the wind, the rhythmic tread of hundreds of feet quickly fades. It's replaced by the grim reality of the journey: dust, sweat, and the constant, grinding ache of walking in armor. Even though you're a knight and have a horse, you often walk alongside it to spare the animal, especially on rough terrain. The infantry, of course, has no such choice. Days blur into one another, marked only by the rising and setting of the sun. The landscape changes from the familiar fields of your home territory to rolling hills and dense forests you've never seen before. The army feels like a slow-moving creature, a caterpillar of steel and leather, devouring the road mile by painful mile. And every evening, the creature must be fed. Your diet on the march is an exercise in stark simplicity. The food from the baggage train is rationed out with miserly precision. In the evening, after the camp has been set up and the sentries posted, you gather in your small company. A fire is lit, and a large cauldron is hung over it. Into the cauldron goes water from a nearby stream, hopefully a clean one, a handful of oats or crushed grains from the supply wagon, and the main ingredient, a chunk of salted beef or pork. You watch as the meat, gray and unappetizing, is hacked into pieces and dropped into the bubbling water. It slowly softens, releasing its salt into the stew. If you're lucky, someone might have an onion or a wild garlic clove to throw in for flavor. After what feels like an eternity, the stew is ready. You line up with your wooden bowl and get your ladle full of hot, salty gruel, along with your ration of the muslin bread or a piece of hardtack to soak in it. You eat sitting on the ground, your back against your saddle, the weariness of the day settling deep into your bones. It's not a meal you savor. It's fuel you consume, hot and fast, before crawling into your bedroll for a few hours of uneasy sleep. This is the official menu. But soon, you learn about the unofficial one. The baggage train can't carry everything. The supplies are finite, and the campaign is long. Within a week, the quartermaster announces a cut in the bread ration. A low grumble runs through the camp. This is where a new, unspoken phase of the campaign begins: foraging. That's the polite term. The soldiers call it living off the land. The peasants whose fields are marching through call it theft. Small, organized parties of men at arms are sent out from the main body of the army. Their job is to acquire whatever they can. You see them return in the evening, their sacks bulging. Sometimes they bring back chickens, a goose, or even a piglet, squealing in protest. These are a welcome addition to the nightly cauldron, transforming the bland stew into something almost luxurious. Other times they bring back cheese, eggs, or freshly baked bread from a village oven. Here's a little-known aspect of this practice: it was often officially sanctioned, though with a veneer of legality. The Army's foraging parties were sometimes equipped with royal purchasing agents who were supposed to pay for the goods they took, usually with specially minted tokens or promises of future payment from the crown. But in the chaos of a campaign, with a hungry army on the move, this system frequently broke down. Payment was often forgotten, and the line between a sanctioned requisition and outright pillaging became dangerously blurred. You see the fear in the eyes of the villagers as your army approaches, and you can't blame them. You are both their protector and their predator. You even take part in one of these foraging expeditions. You and a few other knights ride out, not to raid, but to patrol. You come across a small, isolated farmstead. The farmer, a man whose face is a road map of hardship, bows low, his eyes filled with terror. Your commander speaks to him, his voice firm, but not overtly threatening. He asks for any spare grain, any chickens. The farmer, knowing he has no real choice, voluntarily provides them. You stuff a clucking hen into a saddle, feeling a strange mix of power and shame. The ethics of this are a subject of ongoing debate among military historians. Was this systematic foraging a necessary evil, the only way to sustain an army far from its home base, or was it a fundamental breakdown of discipline, a form of state-sanctioned banditry that brutalized the very people the army was supposed to protect? The answer probably varies from campaign to campaign, commander to commander. But for you, the knight with a live chicken kicking against your leg, the morality is murky at best. That night, the stew is rich with the flavor of fresh chicken. It's the best meal you've had in weeks. As you eat, you try not to think about the farmer and his family and what they'll be eating tomorrow. You are a knight, sworn to an oath of chivalry to protect the weak. But you are also a soldier, and a soldier must eat. The conflict between your ideals and your needs has never been so stark. As the army pushes deeper into hostile territory, the logistical challenges multiply. The supply wagons fall further and further behind, the roads becoming little more than muddy tracks. Foraging becomes less of a supplement and more of a necessity. But another, more fundamental problem soon asserts itself, one even more critical than food: water. You've always taken water for granted. In the castle, it came from a deep, reliable well. In your home village, it came from a clear, fast-flowing stream. Out here, on the march with 1,000 men and even more animals, clean water is a precious and often elusive commodity. The army is a thirsty beast. Every man needs water to drink, to cook with, to wash himself. Every horse, mule, and ox needs to drink gallons of it each day. The sheer demand puts an immense strain on the local environment. A small river can be drunk nearly dry by the time the baggage train at the rear of the army reaches it. Ponds and streams are quickly churned into muddy messes by the hooves of countless animals. You quickly learn the hierarchy of thirst. The vanguard of the army, the knights and mounted sergeants at the front, get the first access to any water source. They get to drink and water their horses while the stream is still relatively clean. By the time the main body of infantry arrives, the water is already murky. By the time the camp followers and the rear guard get there, it's often a brown, unappetizing sludge contaminated with mud and animal waste. This is where your second constant companion comes in ale. Or, more accurately, small beer. Every man is allotted a daily ration from the huge casks in the supply wagons. You start to realize that this isn't just about morale or providing extra calories. It's a matter of public health. The process of brewing, even for a weak beer, involves boiling the water, which kills most of the harmful bacteria. In a world with no concept of germ theory, people knew through generations of experience that drinking beer was often much safer than drinking water from an unknown source. The ale is weak, watery, and tastes vaguely of sour bread, but it quenches your thirst without making you sick. It's the medieval equivalent of a field sanitation system. Wine is also present, but it's reserved for the high command and the wealthier knights. It travels better than ale and has a higher alcohol content, making it even more stable. For a man like you, a glass of wine is a rare treat, perhaps offered by your captain after a successful skirmish. You savor its sharp, acidic taste, a welcome change from the endless monotony of small beer. Here's a peculiar detail about medieval hydration. They also drank something called passe, a drink borrowed from the Romans. It was essentially a mixture of water and sour wine or vinegar. While it sounds unpleasant, the acidity of the vinegar would have helped to kill some of the bacteria in questionable water, making it safer to drink. It was also surprisingly refreshing in the heat. It was the Gatorade of its diet, cheap, effective way to rehydrate the troops. The real danger comes when the ale runs out. One evening, the quartermaster makes the dreaded announcement. Our wagon has broken an axle, and several casks were lost. The ale ration is being cut in half. A palpable sense of dread settles over the camp. Now you are forced to rely more heavily on local water. You learn to be cautious. You look for fast-flowing water, avoiding stagnant ponds. You try to take water from upstream of where the horses are drinking. You watch the veteran soldiers, copying their techniques. Some of them carry a small piece of cloth to strain the worst of the grit out of the water. Others will boil any water they collect before drinking it, a time-consuming but life-saving precaution. The fear of bad water is constant. You've heard stories from older soldiers about campaigns that were lost not to the sword, but to the flux dysentery. A camp struck by a waterborne illness becomes a hell's cape of sick and dying men, their strength draining away, unable to fight. It's an invisible enemy, more terrifying than any armored knight. Historians are still debating the exact mortality rates from disease versus combat in medieval armies. While precise numbers are impossible to come by, the consensus is that for every man killed by a weapon, several more likely died from sickness and infection. Was the near-constant state of low-grade dehydration and reliance on alcohol a contributing factor to the notoriously short tempers and violent outbursts common in camp life? It's a fascinating question. When you're constantly thirsty, sick with worry about the water, and fueled by a steady diet of weak ale, it's easy to see how a small disagreement could escalate into a deadly brawl. That night, you lie in your bedroll, your stomach churning. You drank from a stream that looked clean, but you can't be sure. Every rumble in your gut feels like a potential death sentence. You think of the cool, clean water from the castle well, a luxury you never appreciated until now. Out here, the difference between life and death isn't the quality of your sword, but the quality of your drink. The campaign grinds to a halt. The rival duke, instead of meeting you on the open field for a glorious battle, has withdrawn his forces behind the stone walls of a major fortress. Your army surrounds the castle, and the grim, tedious business of a siege begins. The initial excitement of war evaporates, replaced by a new kind of monotony, one far more dangerous than the garrison duty you once loathed. Your world shrinks to a small patch of muddy ground in the sprawling siege camp that now encircles the enemy stronghold. The camp is a city in itself, fake chaotic, sprawling mess of tents, lean TOS, horse lines, and cook fires. It's noisy, smelly, and rife with tension. Your days are spent digging trenches, building siege engines, and standing guard against potential sorties from the castle defenders. It's hard, repetitive labor, punctuated by moments of sharp, terrifying violence. And the food situation changes dramatically. The baggage train is now stationary, a fixed point from which supplies are distributed. But the surrounding countryside has already been picked clean by your army as foragers. The trickle of acquired chickens and pigs dries up. You are now almost entirely dependent on wits in the wagons, and as the weeks drag on, the rations get tighter and tighter. The bread is the first to suffer. The flour sacks are emptying at an alarming rate. The loaves become smaller, darker, and coarser. The bakers start mixing in other things to extend the flour, being meal, crushed peas, even ground up acorns. The resulting bread is bitter, dense, and sits like a stone in your gut. But it's bread. You eat it without complaint. The salted meat is portioned out in ever smaller pieces. The nightly stew becomes thinner, more watery. It's now little more than hot, salty water with a few grains and a rumor of meat floating in it. Hunger becomes a constant, gnawing presence. You feel your strength beginning to wane. The physical labor of the siege becomes harder each day. Tempers fray. Fights break out in the food lines over the smallest imagined slight. You look up at the castle walls, a grim silhouette against the sky. You know that the people inside are suffering too, perhaps even more than you are. A siege is a race against starvation. You are trying to starve them out before you starve yourselves. It's a brutal, slow-motion battle of attrition, and food is the primary weapon. One day, you are part of a patrol that captures a messenger trying to sneak out of the castle. In his pouch, they find a letter detailing the desperate conditions within. The commander reads it aloud to his officers, and the news spreads through the camp like wildfire. The castle's grain stores are almost empty. They've eaten all the horses. They're down to their last reserves. This news sends a jolt of grim satisfaction through your ranks. Their suffering gives you strength, but your own situation is little better. The camp is becoming a breeding ground for disease. The latrines overflow. The smell is unbearable. Men are falling ill with the flux, their groans a constant sound in the night. The line for the physician's tent is longer than the line for food. Here's a truly grim detail of siege warfare as starvation took hold. The menu on both sides could become horrifically inventive. Historical accounts from famous sieges, like that of Antioch during the First Crusade, speak of soldiers eating their own leather shoes and shields, boiled until they were soft enough to chew, and when the leather ran out, the ultimate taboo was sometimes broken. While often exaggerated by chroniclers for dramatic effect, instances of survival cannibalism during desperate sieges are not unheard of. It's a stark reminder of how thin the veneer of civilization is when faced with absolute starvation. You start to see the signs of real hunger around you. Men with hollow eyes and gaunt faces. The fat of the land has been consumed, and now the fat of the men is being consumed as well. You guard the precious hardtack in your satchel like gold. The academic debate on siege warfare often revolves around its psychology. Was it primarily a logistical contest of who had more food, or was it a battle of wills, a test of morale and discipline under the most extreme pressure imaginable? You watch as a group of your fellow knights, Their faces grim with determination, work to assemble a great trebuchet, a giant stone-throwing catapult. They are weakened by hunger, but their hatred for the enemy on the wall fuels them. It seems to be both. The body may be starving, but the mind can force it to keep fighting. One evening, staring into your bowl of watery cornbread soup, you see a rat scurry past the edge of the firelight. A few weeks ago, the sight would have disgusted you. Now, your first thought is a cold, practical one protein. You don't act on it. Not yet, but you know that the line between a knight and a desperate animal is getting thinner every single day. The Lord's feast has never felt so much like a fever dream. Your army does not starve. The enemy castle, their situation even more dire than yours, finally surrenders. The campaign, a brutal success, is over, but your journey is not. The king, buoyed by this victory and filled with religious fervor, has taken the cross. He has vowed to go on crusade to reclaim the Holy Land, and as a knight sworn to the royal banner, you are going with him. The journey to the coast is long, but your spirits are high, fueled by victory and the promise of a holy quest. From a bustling port in Italy, you board a ship. It's a crowded, creaking vessel, packed to the gunwales with men, horses, and supplies. You've never been on the open sea before, and the experience is a profound shock to your system. The constant heaving motion of the deck, the smell of tar, bilge water, and the close-packed misery of hundreds of seasick men is overwhelming. The food aboard the ship is a new low in your culinary journey. There are no open fires for cooking. The risk of setting the entire wooden vessel ablaze is too great. Your diet consists entirely of cold, preserved rations. You are given a daily portion of ship's biscuit, which is essentially hardtack, but even more dense and often infested with weevils. The old sailors joke that the weevils add a bit of extra meat. You don't find it funny. You learn to tap the biscuit on the railing before you eat it to knock out most of the insects. Alongside the biscuit, you get salted pork, so hard and dry it's almost black, and cheese that is more salt than dairy. Your water is stored in wooden casks, and by the second week at sea, it has a slimy, foul taste. The ale is slightly better, but the supply is limited, rationed out in small cups. This is a diet designed for one purpose, only to prevent you from dying of starvation before you reach your destination. After weeks at sea, you finally make landfall in the Crusader kingdom of Acre. You stumble off the ship onto solid ground, your legs unsteady, your eyes blinking in the brilliant, unfamiliar sunlight. And everything is different. The air is thick with smells you've never encountered before: exotic spices, strange blossoms, the scent of dust in the sea. The architecture is alien. The language is a babble, and the heat is a physical presence, heavy and suffocating. Your first meal on dry land is a revelation. You are billeted with a local Frankish knight, a descendant of earlier crusaders who has made his life here. His servants bring a midday meal, and it's unlike anything you've ever tasted. There's a dish of tender stewed lamb, but it's not just lamb. It's seasoned with cumin and coriander, spices you've only heard of in tales. There are chickpeas, mashed into a smooth, savory paste you learn is called hummus, served with a thin, warm, pliable bread that makes your hardtack seem like a cruel joke. Here's a fascinating detail about the Crusades: they were a major catalyst for cultural and culinary exchange. The European knights who traveled to the Levant were introduced to a whole new world of ingredients. They encountered sugar used then as a spice, not just a sweetener, citrus fruits like lemons and oranges, apricots, and a dazzling array of spices. Many of these ingredients were then brought back to Europe, slowly but surely transforming the palate of the medieval aristocracy. You are, in a sense, on the front lines of a gastronomic invasion, but this new world is not without its dangers. Your body, accustomed to the cold, damp climate of Northern Europe and a diet of bland, preserved foods, rebels against this new environment. The rich, oily food, though delicious, gives you stomach cramps. The local water, teeming with unfamiliar microbes, is a constant threat. Many of your comrades, fresh off the boat, fall violently ill with what the locals call the bloody flux. You see strong knights reduced to weak, shivering shells in a matter of days. You learn to be wary, to drink only wine or water that has been boiled. As you join the Crusader army and begin to march inland, you encounter the unique logistical challenges of campaigning in the desert. Water is scarcer than gold. The sun is a relentless enemy. Your heavy wool Gambi sun and mail hauberk, designed for a cool climate, feel like a personal furnace. You learn to march at night and dressed during the blistering heat of the day. Your rations are now dates, a superfood you've never seen before, sweet, sticky, and packed with energy. You also eat a lot of dried figs and hard, unleavened bread that seems to last forever in the dry heat. The academic debate about the Crusades is vast and complex, touching on religion, politics, and economics. But one often overlooked area is the sheer environmental and biological shock experienced by the participants, where the high casualty rates among newly arrived crusaders due more to Saracen swords or to dehydration, heat stroke, and disease standing under the punishing sun. Your throat parched, watching another one of your countrymen being carried to the physician's tent. It's not hard to guess. One evening, your patrol ambushes a small enemy caravan. Among the spoils is a sack of something precious rice. That night, your camp cook boils it with some dried fruit and spices. It's a soft, fragrant, and comforting dish. As you eat it, you realize how far you've come. You are thousands of miles from home, fighting in a strange and brutal land. The dream of the king's feast is a distant memory. Your world has become a daily struggle for survival, where a simple bowl of rice can feel like the most profound luxury on earth. After years of brutal fighting under the unforgiving Levantine sun, you are finally, mercifully sent home. Your lord, what's left of him, is returning to his estates, and you with him. The journey back is as arduous as the one that brought you here, but this time it's filled with a desperate, homesick hope. You arrive back at the castle, no longer a young green knight, but a hardened veteran. Your face is tanned and weathered. There are new scars on your body, and your eyes hold the quiet, haunted look of a man who has seen too much. You expect to fall back into the old, dull routine of garrison duty, but your lord has other plans. As a reward for your long and loyal service, he grants you a singular privilege, the right to hunt in his forests. This is no small thing. In medieval Europe, all forests, and the game within them, belonged to the local lord. For a common peasant to be caught poaching and killing a deer to feed his family was a crime punishable by mutilation or death. The hunt was a jealously guarded symbol of aristocratic status. Your first hunt is a grand, formal affair. It's a world away from the desperate foraging of your campaign days. This is a highly ritualized sport. You are part of a large party, led by the Lord himself, all mounted on spirited horses. A pack of specially bred hounds, yelping with excitement, dashes through the undergrowth, their handlers running alongside them. The sound of hunting horns echoes through the crisp autumn air, a series of complex calls that signal the location of the prey and the progress of the chase. You spend hours riding hard through the woods, leaping over fallen logs, your heart pounding with the thrill of the chase. Finally, the hounds corner a magnificent stag. It falls to the lord to make the kill, a precise and ceremonial thrust of a specialized hunting spear. The hunt is as much about performance as it is about procurement. That evening, the great hall hosts a feast to celebrate the day's success. Then for the first time, you are seated not at the lower tables, but at a place of honor, close to the lord. The centerpiece of the feast is the stag you helped hunt, roasted whole over the fire. The venison is rich, dark, and has a wild, gamay flavor that tastes of the forest itself. It's accompanied by a sauce made from reed wine and wild berries. This is not the bland, salty fare of the barracks. This is the taste of privilege, but you also discover another, more practical side to your new hunting rights. The Lord allows you to hunt not just the noble prey like deer and boar, but also smaller game for your own pot, on your own time. With a small crossbow or a few well-trained dogs, you can now go into the woods and hunt for rabbits, squirrels, and game birds like pheasant and partridge. This changes your diet completely. You are no longer entirely reliant on the castle's rations. You can supplement the monotonous diet of salted fish and pottage with fresh meat. You learn to set snares, to track game, to butcher and cook what you catch. A rabbit, stewed with some wild onions and herbs you gather from the forest edge, feels like a meal fit for a king. It's a taste of self-sufficiency, a small measure of control over your own existence that you've never had before. The historical debate around hunting is fascinating. Was it purely a symbolic aristocratic pastime, a theater of power as some historians call it, designed to separate the nobility from the common folk, or did it serve a crucial economic function, providing a vital source of fresh meat for the lord's household, especially during the lean winter months? From your new, privileged position, you can see that it was both. The grand, ceremonial stag hunt was pure political theater, but the rabbit in your stew pot is a very real and very welcome source of protein. You become a familiar figure in the woods, the quiet knight who moves with the hunter's patience. You learn the rhythms of the forest, the signs of the seasons, a balm for the soul after the horrors of the crusade. The forest provides. For the first time since you were a boy dreaming of feasts, you are not merely being fed, you are feeding yourself. The food you eat now has a story of a chase, of skill, of a quiet morning in the woods. And that, you realize, is a flavor that no amount of exotic spice can replicate. Your newfound status and hunting privileges provide a welcome taste of fresh food, but they don't change the fundamental economy of the castle. For the rank-and-file soldiers and your fellow household knights, the daily reality is still the same old story: muslin bread, salty cheese, and endless pottage. This scarcity, you soon discover, has created a thriving and complex underground economy within the castle walls. A black market that runs on whispers, favors, and illicit trade. And the most valuable commodity in this secret marketplace is bread. It seems absurd. The castle produces hundreds of loaves a day in its massive, roaring ovens. Bread is everywhere, but it's the type of bread that matters. The social ladder is baked right into the grain. At the top, there's the Lord's panned main, the fluffy, pure white loaf. Below that, the slightly less refined sheet bread for the high-ranking officials. Then comes your own bread, the revel loaf, given to knights, a decent wheaten loaf. And at the bottom is the dark, heavy muslin bread of the common soldiers and servants. The black market exists to bridge the gap between what you're given and what you want. It's a system built on arbitrage. A kitchen servant, for instance, might be able to sneak a few small, leftover white rolls from the Lord's table. These are practically currency. He can't just eat them, that would be too suspicious. Instead, he finds a knight, perhaps one who has had a bad run at dice, and offers a trade. A white roll, still warm from the oven, in exchange for the knight's entire ration of rougher bread for the next 2 days. The servant gets more bulk to fill his belly, and the knight gets a fleeting moment of luxury. You see these transactions happening in quiet corners of the barracks after dark. It's a network of silent nods and quick handoffs. A man-at-arms who has a cousin working in the granary might get access to a little extra flour. He doesn't try to bake it himself, that would require access to the ovens, which are tightly controlled. Instead, he trades the raw flour to a baker's assistant. In return, the assistant ensures the soldier's daily loaf is slightly larger or baked a little longer to have a better crust. Here's a curious detail of this underground economy. It wasn't just about food. Other services were part of the trade. A stable boy who finds an extra bag of oats for a knight's horse might be rewarded with the knight's beer ration for the evening. A laundress who takes special care with the squire's tunic might receive a wedge of his cheese. It was a complex web of favors and barter, a way for those at the bottom to leverage their access and skills to get a little more from those slightly above them. You, with your hunting rights, are now a player in this game, whether you like it or not. A fresh rabbit is a treasure. You can't possibly eat all the game you're entitled to. So you trade. You bring a brace of rabbits to the head cook, Thomas, the same man who used to yell at you when you were a kitchen boy. You don't ask for a favor. Perhaps he'll make sure a small meat pie is accidentally included with your rations. Or maybe he'll give you access to the good herbs and spices, so you can cook your own game with something other than just salt. You learn the currency. A pheasant is worth more than a rabbit. A cut of venison, which you're not technically supposed to trade, could get you a week's worth of favors from the kitchen. It's a dangerous game. The chief administrator of the castle were to catch on, the punishment would be severe for all involved. But the desire for something better, for a taste of a life you're not officially entitled to, is a powerful motivator. The existence of these black markets is a topic of quiet debate among historians of daily life. How widespread were they seen by the castle authorities as a dangerous threat to discipline and order, to be stamped out at all costs, or were they a tacitly accepted reality? A necessary pressure valve that made the rigid, hierarchical food system just about bearable for those at the bottom. The lack of written records people rarely document their illegal activities makes it hard to be certain, but the logic of human nature suggests it was a common, if hidden, feature of institutional life. One evening, you're enjoying a small piece of flaky pastry, a product of your recent trade with the cook, when you see a young squire furtively trading his new boots to a man-at-arms. In return, he gets a small, precious loaf of white bread. The squire cradles the bread like a holy relic before scurrying off into the shadows to eat it. You see the same look in his eyes, that you once had a desperate hunger for something more, a willingness to risk punishment for a single, perfect bite. You realize the castle isn't just fed by its ovens and storerooms. It's also fed by a hidden network of desire, risk, and the timeless, universal trade for a better slice of bread. Peace, you discover, can be just as precarious as war. A simmering border dispute with a neighboring baron, a matter of a few contested acres, and a lot of bruised pride finally boils over. Your lord, ever eager to assert his dominance, declares his intention to settle the matter by force of arms. But instead of a long, drawn-out campaign, this will be a swift, brutal affair. A single, decisive battle to determine ownership of the disputed land. The army marches out, but this time the mood is different. It's not the grim slog of a long campaign. There's a sharp, focused energy. The baggage train is light, carrying only what's needed for a few days. The goal is simple: find the enemy, break them on the field, and be home in a week. The battle, when it comes, is a chaotic and terrifying whirlwind. It's nothing like the ordered maneuvers you practiced in the yard. It's a maelstrom of noise, the thunder of hooves, the high-pitched shriek of war horns, the guttural screams of men, and the hideous, percussive crunch of steel on bone and shield. You find yourself fighting in a tight press of bodies, your movements restricted, your breath coming in ragged gasps. You swing your sword, parry a blow, see an enemy fall, all in a blur of adrenaline and survival instinct. Your side is victorious. The enemy line breaks, and what was a battle becomes a rout. Your lord, magnificent on his white destrier, has carried the day. The journey back to the castle is a triumphant procession. You and your fellow knights are no longer just soldiers, you are heroes. And heroes, you are about to find out, get to feast. The castle prepares for a celebration on a scale you have never witnessed. This is not the stuffy, political dinner of the solar, nor the perfunctory meal after a tournament. This is a raw, boisterous explosion of joy and relief. The great hall is decked out not just with the Lord's formal banners, but with the captured standards of the defeated enemy, a stark and deliberate display of dominance. The sheer quantity and variety of the food is staggering. The long tables are laden with dishes that cater to a warrior's appetite. There are no delicate subtleties or fancy sugar sculptures tonight. This is a feast of meat and abundance. You see whole roasted pigs, sheep and goats, their skins crackling and golden. There are enormous meat pies, their thick crusts barely containing the steaming, savory fillings. Platters are piled high with game birds, dozens of ducks, geese, and pheasants. The bread is the finest white panned main, served in huge baskets, and no one is counting the loaves. The ale flows not from pitchers, but directly from barrels set up in the corners of the hall, and it's the strong, flavorful stuff, not the watery small beer of the barracks. Casks of red wine, captured from the enemy's own baggage train, are opened and passed around freely. You, as a knight who fought bravely, are given a seat of honor. A serving boy, his eyes wide with awe, brings you a plate already piled high with food. You have a thick slice of roast pork, the meat so tender it falls apart, the skin so crisp it shatters in your mouth. You have a leg of goose, glistening with fat. You have a ladle, if you will, of a thick, complex stew, rich with meat and vegetables and seasoned generously. You tear off a piece of the soft white bread and soak up the gravy, the taste an explosion of savory, fatty, salty goodness. It's the antithesis of every meal you've eaten for years. It's a meal designed not for mere survival, but for pure, unadulterated pleasure. Here's a fascinating detail about these victory feasts: they served a crucial social and political purpose. It was a way for the Lord to redistribute the spoils of war and powerfully reinforce the bonds of loyalty with his men. By providing this overwhelming display of generosity, he was visibly rewarding their courage and demonstrating the benefits of serving him faithfully. Every knight and soldier in that hall, stuffed with food and drink, would remember this night and be more willing to fight for him in the future. It was an investment in morale, paid in calories. The hall grows louder and more chaotic as the night wears on. Minstrels sing songs celebrating the day's victory, composing new verses on the spot to praise the deeds of the most valiant knights. Men, their bellies full and their heads swimming with wine, swap stories of the battle, their tales growing grander with each telling. You find yourself laughing, shouting, and drinking toasts with men you fought alongside just hours before. Temporary brotherhood, and this feast is its consummation. The academic interpretation of feasting often focuses on this social bonding element. Was the food itself the point, or was it merely the medium for a more important social ritual? Was the over-the-top abundance a way to collectively forget the terror and trauma of battle, to replace the memory of death with the vibrant, life-affirming act of eating and drinking, looking at the joyful, flushed faces around you? You're certain the answer is yes. This isn't just a meal and very necessary exorcism. You eat until you can eat no more, a feeling you haven't experienced since you were a child. You drink the strong wine, feeling its warmth spread through your tired limbs. For one night, the harsh realities of your world, the politics, the poverty, the constant struggle, are washed away in a tide of gravy and wine. This is the dream feast from your boyhood made real. And it tastes like victory. The glorious, wine-soaked memory of the victory feast fades, and the familiar, grinding rhythm of castle life returns. With it comes the return of the monotonous diet. But now, you notice something else influencing the menu, something that has nothing to do with logistics, seasons, or the spoils of war. It's the tolling of the chapel bell, signaling the start of another fast day. The influence of the church is everywhere in your world. It marks the hours of your day, sanctifies your oaths, and promises salvation or damnation for your soul. It also dictates what you can and cannot eat. The medieval religious calendar is a complex web of feast days and fast days. And there are a lot of fast days. Every Friday is a fast day, in remembrance of the crucifixion. The entire period of Lent, the 40 days leading up to Easter, is a time of fasting. So are the vigils before major religious holidays and for Embertide, weeks scattered throughout the year. All told, it adds up to nearly a third of the year where your diet is strictly regulated by religious law. Fasting, you quickly learn, doesn't mean not eating at all. For most people, It means abstaining from meat and animal products. This includes red meat, poultry, and, in most interpretations, eggs and dairy products like milk, butter, and cheese. For a warrior class whose diet is heavily reliant on salted pork, beef, and hard cheese, this presents a significant challenge on a typical Friday in the castle. The cooks must get creative. The great cauldron of peas pottage is still the centerpiece of the meal, but the chunks of bacon are conspicuously absent. The main source of protein is now fish, and since fresh fish is a luxury reserved for the lord who might have a private fish pond on his estate, for you and the other knights, this means one thing: preserved fish. You are reacquainted with your old friend, the salted cod. Stiff, dry, and intensely salty, it's soaked in, then usually boiled or added to the pottage. It fills the belly, but it's a penitential meal in every sense of the word. Another staple of the fast day menu is herring. You see them served in every conceivable way: salted, smoked, pickled, and dried. The smell of smoked herring, a powerful, oily aroma, fills the hall on fast days, assertive flavor that you either learn to tolerate or actively despise. Here's a curious detail that reveals the medieval mind at work. The definition of fish was surprisingly flexible. Since the prohibition was on land animals and birds, anything that lived primarily in the water was often fair game. The most famous example is the barnacle goose, because these geese were often seen on driftwood, and their nests were never found on land. A peculiar theory developed that they spontaneously generated from barnacles, and could be eaten during Lent. Another creature that fell into this convenient loophole was the beaver. Because of its scaly tail and aquatic habits, its tail was oft unconsidered fishy and permissible on fast days. The line between biology and theology could be very blurry when a hungry stomach was involved. The cooks also rely heavily on vegetables and grains. You eat thick almond milk-based stews, as almonds were a popular and versatile substitute for dairy. You eat bread, of course, lots of bread. And you eat pies filled not with meat, but with fish, eels, or vegetables. These Lenten pies are a testament to the ingenuity of the medieval cook, trying to create something palatable within a strict set of rules. For the wealthy, fasting was an opportunity to display their riches in other ways. Their tables would be laden with elaborate fish dishes, expensive imported fruits, and fantastical creations made from marzipan. But for you, it's a grim business. The food is less satisfying, less caloric, dense. You feel a distinct lack of energy on fast days, which is a problem when your job requires constant physical readiness. The sincerity with which knights and soldiers observe these fasts is a subject of historical debate. Were they pious men, willingly sacrificing their comfort for their faith, or did they see it as just another hardship to be endured, grumbling their way through another meal of smoked herring? And how strictly was it enforced in a military environment? Especially during a campaign, theologians debated whether soldiers on active duty could be excused from fasting, with no clear consensus ever being reached. It likely depended on the personal piety of the commander. You, for your part, follow the rules. The fear of divine retribution is a powerful motivator, but you can't help but notice the difference in the mood of the hall on a fast day. The boisterous energy is gone, replaced by a quiet, sullen atmosphere. The men eat their salted fish and dark bread with a grim sense of duty. You look at the plate of pickled herring before you. It stares back with a single, glassy eye. You think of the rich, roasted venison from the hunt, the savory pork from the victory feast. The contrast is immense. Your life as a knight, you realize, is a constant oscillation between feast and fast, not just in the literal sense, but in a metaphorical one too. It's a life of extremes: glory and boredom, violence and piety, abundance and deprivation. You pick up the herring and take a bite. It tastes like obligation. The campaign was a success, the feast was glorious, and the fasts are being dutifully observed. A sense of normalcy, however tenuous, has settled over the castle. But a new enemy is silently gathering its forces, an enemy more insidious and far deadlier than any rival baron. It's an enemy you can't see, can't fight with a sword, and can't intimidate with a show of force. It's an enemy that you invite into your own body every time you sit down to eat. It starts subtly. A few men in the barracks complain of stomach cramps. They are pale and weak, spending most of their time in the latrine. The castle physician, a man who smells of dried herbs and condescension, diagnoses it as a simple imbalance of the humors and prescribes rest and a diet of thin barley gruel. But then more men fall ill, but then more men fall. The sickness spreads from the barracks to the servants' quarters, and then to the squire's hall. The groans of the sick become a constant, low hum in the background of castle life. The culprit is the food, or rather, what's in the food. In a world without refrigeration, keeping food safe is a constant battle. The vast storerooms of the castle, designed to hold supplies for months, are also perfect breeding grounds for bacteria, mold, and vermin. You start to look at your daily rations with a new, suspicious eye. You examine the bread more closely, noticing the faint greenish-blue tinge of mold near the crust. The bakers do their best to cut it away, but you know the invisible tendrils have spread deep into the loaf. Sometimes the bread has a sour, alcoholic taste, a sign that the flour has started to ferment. The salted meat is an even bigger problem. If it has been salted properly, or if the barrels are cracked and let in moisture, rot can set in. You've seen cooks cut away slimy, discolored parts of a joint of beef, salvaging what they can. You try not to think about what might be left behind. The cheese, your trusty, salty companion, can also turn against you, developing bitter molds or becoming infested with wriggling cheese mites. And then there's the pottage, the great communal stew. It's an efficient way to feed many people, but it's also a perfect incubator. A single piece of tainted meat or a handful of spoiled vegetables can contaminate the entire cauldron, delivering a dose of sickness to everyone who eats from it. Here's a particularly nasty historical detail. A common affliction was ergotism, known in the Middle Ages as Street Anthony's fire. It was caused by a fungus called durget that grows on rye, a staple grain for the bread of the lower classes. The poisoning caused two horrific sets of symptoms: a gangrenous form, where the victim's limbs would become infected, turn black, and fall off into convulsive form, causing painful seizures, muscle spasms, and terrifying hallucinations. Entire villages were sometimes afflicted by this fire, believed to be a divine punishment. You look at your dark muslin bread, made from a mix of wheat and rye, and you pray the grain was clean. The castle becomes a place of fear and foul smells. The physician is overwhelmed. His cures, bloodletting, herbal purges, and prayers seem to have little effect. Men you know, strong men who survived the chaos of battle, are now laid low by something they ate. They grow weak, dehydrated, and delirious with fever. Some of them don't recover. The distinction between the food of the rich and the poor becomes a matter of life and death. The lord and his family, eating fresher food prepared in their private kitchen, remain largely untouched by the sickness. Their bread is made from clean, white flour. Their meat is more likely to be fresh from the hunt or recent slaughter. They have access to wine, which is safer than the communal ale that might have been brewed with contaminated water. The sickness is a class issue. It preys on the poor and the rank and file. The debate among medical historians is ongoing. What were the specific pathogens responsible for these frequent outbreaks of the flux? Were the pestilence described in medieval chronicles, were they bacterial infections, like Salmonella and D. coli, viral gastroenteritis, or parasitic infections, like Giardia, without modern diagnostic tools? It's impossible to know for sure. It was likely a grim cocktail of all of them, a constant, low-level biological warfare being waged against the population. You take precautions. You try to trade for the freshest-looking bread. You inspect your piece of meat carefully before putting it in your mouth. You try your bread over a fire, hoping the heat will kill whatever might be on it. You even consider giving up the communal pottage altogether, preferring to gnaw on your hard but reliable hardtack. One of your comrades, a young knight named Piers with whom you shared many a watch on the battlements, falls gravely ill. You visit him in the makeshift infirmary. Each he is a pale shadow of his former self, his eyes wide with fear. He can't keep any food down. You realize with a cold certainty that he is not going to survive. He didn't die from a lance to the chest or a sword to the gut. He was killed by a bad piece of pork. That night, you can barely touch your food. The familiar taste of salted fish and dry bread now seems menacing. You understand the fundamental truth of your existence. The most dangerous thing you do each day is not training with a sword, but simply sitting down to dinner. The sickness in the castle eventually subsides, leaving a trail of grief and a lingering sense of vulnerability. Life, however, must go on. One crisp autumn afternoon, your lord dispatches you on an errand. It's not a military task, but a bureaucratic one. A dispute has arisen over the boundary of a remote piece of the lord's estate, and he needs a reliable Mononite to ride out, inspect the land, speak to the tenants, and bring back a full report. You ride out alone, glad to be free of the castle's oppressive, grief-stricken atmosphere. After a day's journey, you arrive in the small, huddled village at the edge of your lord's domain. It's a world away from the stone and steel reality of the castle. The houses are small, timber-framed huts with wattle and daub walls and thatched roofs. The air smells of wood smoke, damp earth, and lit stock. You are an imposing figure here, a knight in armor representing the lord's authority. The villagers are wary, deferential. You are quartered in the cottage of the village reeve, the local man responsible for overseeing the peasants' work. He is nervous but hospitable, eager to please the lord's messenger. His wife, a woman whose hands are chapped and rough from a lifetime of labor, offers you a meal. You sit at their rough-hewn wooden table, the only piece of furniture in the main room besides a few stools and a chest. The fire in the central hearth provides the only light, casting long, dancing shadows. You are curious to see what these people, the foundation upon which your entire world is built, actually eat. What you are served is a lesson in humility. The woman places a wooden bowl in front of you. It contains a pottage, but it's unlike any you've had before. It's thin and watery, mostly comprised of dark leafy greens, cabbage, perhaps some kale and a few slivers of onion. There is no trace of meat, no bacon, not even the sulnies of preserved fish. It is the ghost of a stew. Alongside it, she gives you a piece of bread. It's a dark, almost black, heavy round loaf. You take a bite, then taste strongly of barley on oats. It's a world away from even the muslin bread you get at the castle. This is the bread of pure subsistence. You eat, trying to mask your surprise. The reeve and his family eat from a single, shared bowl, scooping out the thin soup with their pieces of bread. They eat silently, quickly. This is not a meal for pleasure. It is the bare minimum of fuel required to get them through another day of back-breaking work in the fields. Here is a small but telling detail of peasant life, their primary source of fattened flavor, when they could get it, was not from meat but from dripping, the collected fat from the lord's roasting spits in the castle kitchen. A small pot of this precious, savory fat might be a rare treat, used to enrich their pottage or spread on their bread. For this family, tonight, there is no dripping. You ask the reeve about the harvest, about their lives. He speaks of the constant struggle. The best of their grain, the wheat, goes to the lord as part of their rent. They live on the lesser grains, rye, barley, oats. The best of their livestock is also for the lord. They might keep a few chickens for eggs, or if they are lucky, a single pig, which they will fatten all year for a winter slaughter, a rare bonanza of meat that has to be carefully preserved to last. Not by choice, but by necessity. The historical study of the medieval peasantry is often a study of malnutrition. Analysis of skeletal remains from peasant cemeteries reveals lives of hardship, signs of vitamin deficiencies, stunted growth, and teeth worn down by the grit in their coarse bread. The question still debated by historians is the degree of their poverty. Was the average peasant life a constant, desperate struggle on the edge of starvation, or were there periods of relative plenty? With a more varied diet than the grim picture often painted, the answer likely lies somewhere in between, varying greatly by region, season, and the whims of the weather and their lord. As you finish your meal, the woman offers you a cup of water. There is no ale here. Ale requires surplus grain for malting, a luxury they cannot afford. You suddenly see the castle's rations in a completely new light. Your daily loaf of Maslin bread, which you so often despise, is a luxury compared to the gritty oat cake of the peasantry. The salty, stringy meat in your pottage is a feast compared to their watery vegetable broth. Your weak, sour small beer is a mark of status. You have been complaining about the food of the guards, while these people eat the food of the prisoners. You sleep that night on a straw pallet by the fire, the sounds of the family's breathing filling the small hut. You think of your complaints, your desires, your participation in the bread black market to get a better loaf. It all seems so petty, so profoundly entitled. You are part of a system that extracts the wealth of the land, the wheat, the meat, the labor, and concentrates it behind castle walls. The food you eat, as bad as you think it is directly subsidized by the hunger of the people around you. It's a sobering, uncomfortable realization. The next morning, when the reeve's wife offers you another piece of their dark, heavy bread for your journey, you accept it with a gratitude you have never felt before. Your trip to the village leaves a lasting impression on you. The memory of that simple, stark meal sharpens your appreciation for the small luxuries you once took for granted. But your world is about to be expanded once again. A wealthy merchant, seeking to curry favor with your lord, arrives at the castle. He has traveled extensively, his caravans crossing Europe to the great trading hubs of Venice and Genoa. He brings with him gifts, and among them is a small, heavily guarded chest. That evening, the merchant is the guest of honor at a private dinner in the lord's solar. You are on duty, standing guard at the door, but the room is small, and you can see into your everything. The meal starts simply enough with roasted chicken. But then, the merchant, with a performer's flourish, opens his chest. The air is immediately filled with a symphony of smells you've only ever dreamed of, smells you vaguely remember from your time in the faraway Holy Land. The chest is filled with small leather pouches. The merchant opens one and sprinkles a fine, dark powder over a piece of the chicken before offering it to the lord. It's pepper. The lord eats it, and his eyes widen in surprise and pleasure. The merchant then introduces other treasures. There's a pouch of cinnamon, its scent warm and sweet. There are cloves, looking like tiny, dried flower buds, their aroma pungent and medicinal. There's ginger, nutmeg, and saffron, its delicate reds worth more than their weight in gold. You watch, fascinated, as the cook is summoned. He looks at the spices with the reverence a priest would reserve for holy relics. HES instructed to prepare a new sauce for the meat, using a pinch of this and a dash of that. The result is a dish that is not just food, but an experience. The simple roasted chicken is transformed into something exotic, complex, and intoxicating. This is your first close-up look at the spice trade, the global network that was one of the most powerful economic engines of the medieval and early modern world. These dried powders and seeds, traveling thousands of miles from Indonesia, India, and the Middle East, through treacherous sea lanes and bandit-infested caravan routes, were the ultimate luxury good. They were a statement of wealth and power so profound that they could alter politics and launch voyages of discovery. Here's a small detail that illustrates their value. Some spices, particularly pepper and cloves, were so portable and universally desired that they were used like currency. A man could literally pay his rent or his taxes with a few peppercorns. The pouch the merchant brought was likely worth more than the entire annual income of the village you just visited. You, of course, do not get to taste the spiced chicken, but the aroma wafts out of the solar, a tantalizing ghost that hangs in the hallway. The next day, however, you get lucky. Your captain, who was at the dinner, is in a good mood. He was gifted a small twist of paper containing a few grains of black pepper by the merchant. In a moment of generosity, he shares it with you. He tells you to crush the small, hard spheres and sprinkle them on your evening meal. That night, you sit down to your usual bowl of peas pottage with salted pork. It's the same bland, functional meal you've eaten 1,000 times, but tonight, you have a secret weapon. You carefully crush the peppercorns with the hilt of your dagger and sprinkle the precious dust into your bowl. You take a spoonful. The effect is electric. The familiar, flat taste of the pottage is suddenly alive. The pepper doesn't just add its own flavor, it seems to amplify everything else: the saltness of the pork, the earthiness of the peas. It's a spark in the darkness, a moment of startling, pungent clarity. It's not just a taste, it's a sensation, a warmth that spreads from your tongue through your whole body. The historical debate around the use of spices is an interesting one. The old, popular theory was that spices were used primarily to mask the taste of spoiled meat. While they certainly could help, as you saw in the Lord Solar, modern historians argue this wasn't their main purpose. The people who could afford spices were the same people who could afford fresh meat. The real reason for their use was much simpler: status and flavor. Spices were the medieval equivalent of driving a fancy car or wearing designer clothes. It was a way to show off your wealth and sophisticated palate. It was culinary conspicuous consumption. For you, however, this single pepper-dusted meal is a revelation. It opens your mind to the possibilities of flavor. You start to pay more attention to the wild herbs growing around the castle. You crush wild garlic leads into your cheese. You find wild thyme and rosemary and add them to the rabbits you hunt. You are trying to replicate that spark, that moment of transformation. Your palate has been awakened. The spices from the merchant's chest have given you a new standard, a new dream. It's no longer just about the richness of a feast, but about the artful, almost magical power of flavor. You know you may never taste those exotic spices again, but the memory of that single, peppery mouthful has changed the way you think about food forever. It has taught you that even the humblest meal can be elevated, that a little spark of something special can make the unbearable bearable. The memory of the pepper-laced pottage lingers, a fleeting taste of a world beyond your reach. It also gets you thinking. You've experienced the entire spectrum of food in this castle, from the watery gruel of a peasant's hut to the spice-laden delicacies of the Lord's table. You understand the what, but now you find yourself wondering about the why. Why is your food the way? It is why the endless salted meat and muslin bread. You always assumed it was just a fact of life, but after seeing the careful calculations of the merchant and the Lord, you start to suspect it's a matter of cold, hard numbers. Your curiosity leads you to the castle's reeve, the chief administrator you once feared. H.E.S. a stern, humorless man named Oswald, but H.E.S. also meticulous. You find an excuse to speak with him, asking some innocuous question about supplies. Oswald, perhaps seeing a glimmer of intelligence beyond your sword arm, decides to show you his world. He takes you into his small, cramped office, a room overflowing with scrolls of parchment and wax tablets. This, he tells you, is the castle's brain, and at the center of that brain is a set of account books. He unrolls a large scroll, and you see not words, but columns of numbers and symbols written in a neat, cramped hand. This, he explains, is the household budget, and a huge portion of it is dedicated to food. Oswald, warming to his subject, starts to break it down for you. He points to a line item for grain. He explains the cost of the wheat for the Lord's white bread versus the cost of the rye and barley for the household's darker loaves. The difference is staggering. By feeding the lower ranks muslin bread instead of white bread, the Lord saves enough money in a year to fully equip 3 men-at-arms. Your bad bread is paying for your comrades' armor. Then he shows you the entry for meat. He explains that a live pig is an asset. It can be slaughtered for a feast, providing fresh meat. But if you salt and preserve that same pig, it becomes a different kind of asset, a stable, long-lasting source of rations that can see the garrison through a winter. The cost isn't just the pig itself, but the immense quantity of salt required to cure it, the barrels to store it in, and the labor to process it. Salty pork you eat represents a careful economic decision, choosing long-term security over short-term pleasure. Here's a fascinating detail of medieval accounting. It was incredibly complex. Without standardized units of currency or measurement, a reeve like Oswald had to be a master of conversion. He had to know how many chickens a bushel of wheat was worth, how many days of a mason's labor could be traded for a cask of ale. The entire economy of the castle was a fluid system of barter, service, and currency, and he had to track it all. Oswald shows you the numbers for the last military campaign. The logistics are mind-boggling. You see the cost of thousands of horseshoe nails, the price of fodder for the horses, and, of course, the expense of the food. He shows you the budget for hardtack. It's cheap to make, but the sheer volume required is immense. He tells you, with a grim sort of pride, that he calculated the army's calorie requirements to within 100 loaves of what was actually needed. It's not just about courage and strategy, it's about accountancy. The historical debate here is subtle but important. Did medieval lords intentionally feed their knights poorer quality food to save money and keep them dependent as a form of social control, or was the poor quality of the food simply the unavoidable outcome of the economic and technological realities of the time? Looking at Oswald's precise, emotional's calculations, you lean toward the latter. The Lord isn't feeding you bad food because HES cruel. HES feeding you bad food because it's the only way the numbers add up. His entire magnificent lifestyle, the tapestries, the fine clothes, the desires, is built upon 1,000 such frugal decisions. The castle is a business, and you are both an employee and an expense on the ledger. Oswald even shows you the entry for the recent victory feast. The amount of money spent on that single night of celebration for the extra wine, the fresh meat, the white flour is enough to pay your wages for 10 years. It wasn't just a party, it was a massive, calculated expenditure, a bonus paid out to ensure future loyalty. You leave Oswald's office with your head spinning. The world, which had seemed to operate on principles of honor, duty, and faith, now seems to run on something far more fundamental: profit and loss. The blandness of your pottage, the hardness of your bread, the saltness of your meat, it's all a reflection of your precise value in Oswald's ledger. You are worth more than a peasant, so you get a bit of bacon in your pottage. You are worth less than a baron, so you don't get the spiced wine. That evening, as you chew on your ration of muslin bread, the taste is different. It no longer tastes of just grain and yeast. It tastes of economic necessity, and in a strange way, this new understanding is more disillusioning than any hardship you faced. The dream of the feast wasn't just about luxury, it was about belonging to a world that seemed above such petty concerns. But now you know the truth: the feast itself is just another entry in the account book. The revelation in the Reeves office hangs over you as autumn fades into winter. And with winter comes a new kind of hardship, one that no amount of accounting can truly mitigate. The sky turns a perpetual bruised gray. The wind, finding every crack in the castle's stone walls, carries a damp, bone-deep chill. The world outside the gates is frozen solid. The roads impassable, with snow and ice in the summer, now feels like a prison. You are sealed in. This is the season when the careful calculations of the Reeve are put to the ultimate test. The flow of fresh supplies from the estate, the occasional cart of vegetables, the fresh milled flour, the autumn slaughter of livestock ceases completely. The castle must now survive on what it has stored within its walls. You are living on the fat of the land, accumulated during the plentiful summer and autumn months. Your diet, already monotonous, narrows even further. It becomes a relentless rotation of the same few items, the holy trinity of preservation: salted, smoked, and dried. The menu is a dirge: salted beef, salted pork, salted pork, salted cod, salted cod, salted cod, salted herring. The cheese is hard and salty. The bread, baked from flour that has been in storage for months, tastes stale and musty from the moment it leaves the oven. Freshness is a distant, taunting memory. You dream of the crunch of a fresh apple, the sweetness of a summer berry. The only vegetables you see are those that can endure long storage in the root cellar: onions, turnips, and hard winter cabbages, all of which invariably end up boiled into submission in the daily pottage. But the greatest enemy during the long castle winter is not hunger, but boredom. A profound and soul-crushing boredom that seeps into everything. With the training yard covered in snow and no campaigns to prepare for, there is little to do. Your duties shrink to the bare minimum: standing watch on the icy battlements, the cold seeping through your thickest cloaks, and performing basic maintenance on gear that won't be used for months. The days are short, the nights achingly long. To save on expensive firewood and candles, the common halls are often left in a state of perpetual twilight. You spend hours huddled with the other knights and men at arms around a single, smoky brazier, the air thick with the smell of wet wool and unwashed bodies. There are only so many stories you can tell, only so many times you can repair the same leather strap on your armor. The food in this context becomes more than just sustenance. It's one of the few events of the day, a punctuation mark in the endless, run-on sentence of waiting. But its sheer, grinding monotony does nothing to lift the spirits. Eating the same meal, day after day, becomes a psychological burden. Each spoonful of the salty pottage is a reminder of your confinement, a taste of your isolation. Here's a detail of medieval life that is often overlooked: the impact of seasonal affective disorder. In a world without artificial light, the long dark months of winter had a profound psychological effect. The lack of sunlight, combined with a nutrient-poor diet lacking in fresh vegetables and fruits and therefore vitamin C and D, likely led to widespread depression, lethargy, and irritability. The notorious cabin fever of the castle winter was probably a very real clinical condition. Fights become more common, sparked by the smallest of grievances, a perceived insult, a dispute over a place closer to the fire, a stolen bit of bread. Any of these can escalate into furious, desperate violence. The camaraderie forged in battle evaporates in the stifling boredom of the winter barracks. You do your best to stay quiet, to keep to yourself, to not draw attention. The academic debate on this topic centers on survival strategies. How did medieval communities cope with the psychological strain of winter? Religion played a role, with the Christmas festivities providing a much-needed period of feasting and celebration in the heart of the darkness. Games of chance, dice, and various board games were immensely popular, a way to pass the long hours and, for some, to win or lose small fortunes. But for many, the primary coping mechanism was simply enduring, the grim, white-knuckled grip on sanity until the spring thaw. You find your own ways to cope. You spend time with the castle's hounds, their simple, warm affection a comfort. You practice your sword forms in a cold, sheltered corner of the bailey until your muscles burn, the physical exertion a welcome distraction. You think of the sun-baked lands of the Crusade, a place you once hated, but now remember with a strange sort of fondness for its warmth and light. One bleak afternoon, you are gnawing on a piece of hardtack. It's preferable to the moldy bread today, and staring out a narrow window at the swirling snow. You see the Reeve Oswald hurrying across the courtyard, his cloak pulled tight, a look of grim concentration on his face. You realize that for him, winter is not a time of boredom, but of supreme anxiety. He is constantly checking his stores, rationing the firewood, counting the days until the thaw. His numbers are all that stand between the castle and a slow, cold death by starvation. You turn away from the window. The winter, you understand, is the ultimate test. It strips away all the illusions of chivalry and glory. There are no trumpets, no banners, no feasts. There is only the cold, the dark, the waiting, and the relentless, unchanging taste of salt. The relentless winter, with its damp chill and treacherous ice, finally claims a victim. It's not the cold itself, but a stupid accident. You slip on a patch of ice in the courtyard during morning drills. You try to catch your balance, but your leg twists under you at an unnatural angle. The sound of the bone breaking is a sickening, dry crack that you feel more than you hear. The pain is immediate, white-hot, and absolute. Two of your comrades carry you to the castle's infirmary, a small, cold room near the chapel that always smells faintly of vinegar and decay. The castle's physician is summoned. He is the same man who presided over the outbreak of the flux, a man whose confidence far exceeds his competence. He examines your leg, his touch surprisingly rough, and pronounces that the bone is indeed fractured. His proposed treatment is simple and terrifying. He must set the bone. This involves him and a burly assistant pulling on your leg with all their might to realign the broken ends. While you are very much awake, the pain is a red fog that consumes you. After the ordeal is over and your leg is crudely splinted, the physician turns his attention to your recovery plan. And a huge part of that plan, you discover, is your diet. You are now a patient, and you must eat a patient's food. The goal of this sick food is not to provide pleasure or even basic fuel for work. Its purpose, according to the prevailing medical theory, is to help rebalance your body's humors, which have been thrown into disarray by the injury. According to the theory of the four humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, your health depends on these fluids being in perfect balance. Sickness and injury are caused by an excess of one humor. The physician's job is to restore equilibrium through various means, and diet is a key tool. Foods work, wet or dry, and were prescribed to counteract the patient's specific imbalance. Your first medicinal meal arrives. It's a bowl of thin, watery gruel, or coddle. It's made from oatmeal, boiled with water until it's a semi-translucent slurry. It is bland beyond belief, with not even a hint of salt. This, the physician explains, is a cooling, unmoistening food designed to reduce the hot and dry inflammation of your injury. The other staple of your new diet is wine, but not for drinking. You are given bread-sopped pieces of white bread, a rare luxury, granted only to the sick, soaked in watered-down wine. The idea is that the wine has restorative properties and that the bread is easily digestible, putting minimal strain on your system. It tastes sour and vaguely sweet, a bizarre combination that does little to whet your appetite. Here's a peculiar detail from medieval medical practice. One of the most highly recommended foods for invalids was chicken. But not just any chicken. It had to be an old chicken, as younger birds were considered too moist. The chicken was to be boiled for a very long time, the resulting broth skimmed of all fat, and the stringy, flavorless meat served to the patient. This chicken cure was considered the height of restorative cuisine. You are lucky, or perhaps unlucky, enough to be prescribed this. The thin, greasy broth does little to comfort you. Gone are the rough, hearty foods of the barracks. No more salted pork, no hard cheese, no dark bread. These are considered coarse, hot foods that would only exacerbate your condition. Your diet is now one of slops, broths, and insipid, wine-soaked bread. You feel yourself growing weaker, not from the injury, but from the cure. The gnawing hunger of the siege was a straightforward misery. This is a more frustrating kind of weakness, a prescribed starvation in the name of medicine. The historical debate around medieval medicine is a fierce one. Was it all just dangerous quackery based on flawed theories, often doing more harm than good, or were there elements of effective, practical care hidden within the humoral theory? Some historians argue that while the theory was wrong, Some of the practices, like prescribing rest and easily digestible foods for the sick, were sensible. Others maintain that procedures like bloodletting and prescribing diets that lead to malnutrition actively hindered recovery. Lying on your cot, your stomach crumbling as you stare at a bowl of thin chicken broth, you know which side you're on. Your comrades visit you, smuggling in forbidden treats, a piece of hard cheese, a crust of their dark bread. These illicit morsels taste like heaven, a burst of flavor and substance in a world of watery gruel. You devour them in secret, terrified of the physician finding out. The days pass in a blur of pain, boredom, and weakness. You are trapped in this small room, your world reduced to the four walls and the physician's daily visits. You listen to the sounds of the castle outside, the clang of steel from the yard, the laughter from the hall, and you have never felt more isolated. Your injury has made you a liability, an expense, another mouth to feed without return. And the food you are given is a constant reminder of your useless, fragile state. Insubstantial taste of being broken. The splint comes off. Your leg is weak, scarred, and aches with every shift in the weather, but it holds your weight. After what feels like an eternity, you are released from the infirmary's bland tyranny. You hobble back into the life of the castle, a ghost returning to the world of the living. But you are changed. The injury has left you with a permanent limp. You will never again have the speed and agility required for the front line of a cavalry charge. Your career as a battle-ready knight is over. Your lord, however, is not a cruel man. He remembers your years of service, your loyalty on the crusade, your valor in the last battle. Instead, you are given a new role. You are made the master of the armory, responsible for the upkeep and inventory of the castle's weapons and armor. It's a position of trust and responsibility, a quiet, respectable end to a fighting man's career. The winter finally breaks. The snow melts, the rivers swell, and the first green shoots appear in the fields. The world feels reborn, and so do you. With the roads passable again in your new, less physically demanding role, the Lord grants you a period of leave to fully recover. You are to return to your home, the small village where you were born, a place you haven't seen since you left as a boy to become a page. The journey is slow, your limp a constant companion, but your heart is light. As you get closer, the landscape becomes achingly familiar. You recognize the curve of a hill, the shape of a particular stand of oak trees. You ride into the village, and it's both the same and completely different. The buildings are older, more weathered. The faces are new, though you see glimmers of your childhood friends in the features of their children. You find your family's cottage. Your parents are long gone, but your younger brother, who you last saw as a small boy, now runs the small plot of land. He is a farmer, his face and hands shaped by the earth and the seasons. He doesn't recognize you at first, this scarred, limping knight, but when you speak his name, his eyes widen, and a slow, wondrous smile spreads across his face. That evening, you sit in the cottage of your birth. Your sister-in-law, a quiet, capable woman, prepares the evening meal. The smell that fills the small room is so deeply familiar it makes your throat ache. It's the smell of your childhood. She brings you a bowl, and you look down at a simple, unpretentious stew. It's made with leeks and potatoes from their garden, a bit of bacon from the pig they slaughtered at Christmas, and thickened with barley. It is, by any objective measure, a humble peasant meal. But as you take the first spoonful, something extraordinary happens. The taste transcends the simple ingredients. It's the taste of home. It's a flavor unburdened by politics, by rank, by war, or by medicine. It's not the aspirational taste of a lord's feast, nor the pragmatic taste of a soldier's ration, nor the penitential taste of a fast-day fish. It is simply real. You eat, and with each bite, the layers of your life seem to peel away. You are not a knight, not a veteran, not the master of the armory. You are just a man, sitting in his family's home, eating a bowl of stew. Your brother tells you about his life, his struggles with the harvest, his pride in his children. You tell him not about the battles and the sieges, but about the strange foods you ate in the East, the taste of the sea, the weight of the winter boredom. Here's a simple, human detail that history often forgets: the power of comfort food. For soldiers, crusaders, and travelers throughout history, the memory of the tastes of home was a powerful anchor, a psychological touchstone in a world of chaos and uncertainty. The desire for a specific, familiar dish could be overwhelming, a longing as powerful as any other human emotion. The debate among food historians often touches on the concept of terroir, the idea that food tastes of the specific place it comes from: the soil, the climate, the water. But perhaps there is also a terroir of the soul. The food we grow up with becomes part of our identity, and tasting it again is a form of homecoming. Did this deep-seated connection to local, familiar flavors contribute to the suspicion and rejection of foreign foods in many historical cultures? It's a compelling thought. Your sister-in-law gives you a piece of bread, baked that morning in her small clay oven. It's a simple, honest rye bread, but it's fresh, warm, and comforting. It's the best thing you've tasted in years. Better than the Lord's white bread, better than any spiced delicacy. You spend a week in the village, your body and spirit slowly mending. You eat their simple food every day, and you feel yourself growing stronger. The blandness of the infirmary is washed away by the savory goodness of the stew. The saltness of the barracks rations is forgotten in the freshness of the garden vegetables. On the day you leave to return to the castle, your sister-in-law wraps a small loaf of bread and a piece of cheese for your journey. As you ride away, you look back at the small, smoky village, and you understand something profound. You spent your entire life chasing the dream of the feast, the taste of glory. You endured decades of terrible food in pursuit of that dream. But in the end, the most satisfying meal of your life was not found in a king's hall or a crusader's camp, but in a humble cottage, in a simple bowl of your mother's stew. You return to the castle a different man. Your time in your home village has settled something in you. The restless ambition that once drove you has been replaced by a quiet sense of perspective. You embrace your new role as master of the armory with a steady, diligent hand. Your days are now spent not in the saddle, but amongst the familiar smells of whetstones, oil, and leather. You are good at it. Your years of maintaining your own gear have given you an intimate understanding of every buckle, strap, and rivet. A few years into your new, peaceful life, your Lord summons you. He is pleased with your service, both past and present. As a final reward, a pension for your long and battered career, he grants you a small fief. It's not a grand estate, just a handful of acres, a small farmhouse, and a few tenant families, the very same piece of land you were sent to inspect all those years ago. For the first time in your life, you are no longer just a household knight, dependent on the Lord's table. You have a home. The transition from soldier to farmer is a jarring one. You ride out to your new property. The deed, a precious roll of parchment with the Lord's wax seal, tucked safely in your tunic. The farmhouse is modest but sturdy. The fields are green and promising. Your tenant farmers, the descendants of the same people you met years ago, greet you with the same wary deference they would show any new master. You imagine a life of ease, living off the bounty of your own land. You envision your table laden with fresh bread from your own wheat, roasted chickens from your own yard, and sweet milk from your own cow. The reality is far more complicated. You quickly learn that you know how to wield a sword, but you have no idea how to wield a scythe. You know the logistics of a military campaign, but you are clueless about the logistics of a harvest. You spent your life consuming food that was provided for you. Now you are responsible for producing it, not just for yourself, but for your tenants and for the portion you owe the Lord as tax. Your first year is a series of harsh lessons. A late frost damages your barley crop. One of your two precious oxen falls ill and dies. A fox gets into the henhouse and makes off with half your chickens. You learn that the enemies in this new life are not men in armor, but drought, blight, and bad luck. The food you eat is a direct reflection of your own labor and competence, and in that first year, it's a meager fare. You are too proud to ask for help, so you live on what you can manage. Your bread is coarse and badly baked. Your pottage is thin. There is a profound and humbling irony in it all. After a lifetime of complaining about the food provided by others, you find that the food you provide for yourself is even worse. Here's a small, telling detail about medieval agriculture. The concept of crop rotation was still in its infancy. For centuries, farmers used a simple-to-field system, leaving half their land fallow, uncultivated each year to recover its fertility. The later development of the three-field system, rotating between a winter crop, a spring crop, and a fallow field, was a major agricultural revolution, significantly increasing food production and population growth. On your small fief, you are still bound by the old, less efficient ways. You start to spend time with your tenant farmers, not as a student. You swallow your nightly pride and ask them for advice. They show you how to read the weather, how to judge the soil, when to plant, and when to harvest. You learn the back-breaking rhythm of farm work, a different kind of exhaustion than the weariness of the march. The historical relationship between a minor lord and his tenants is a subject of much debate. Was it a purely exploitative relationship, with the lord extracting as much wealth as possible from the peasants, or was it more of a symbiotic, if unequal, partnership, where the lord's protection and management were necessary for the survival of the community on your small plot of land? You discover it's the latter. You need their labor and expertise as much as they need your name and authority to protect them from bandits or the encroachments of a neighboring lord. Slowly, things improve. The next harvest is better. You manage to buy a new ox. Your chickens thrive. Your table is no longer bare. You eat bread made from wheat you grew yourself, and it tastes of accomplishment. You eat a stew flavored with a piece of pork from a pig you raised, and it tastes of hard-won success. It's not the fancy food of the castle, but it's yours. You are no longer just a consumer in the great food chain of the kingdom. You are now a producer, a vital link in that chain. You oversee the milling of your grain. You bargain with merchants in the local market. You decide how much to store for the winter and how much to sell. One evening, sitting outside your farmhouse, you look over your fields, shimmering in the evening light. You think back to your life as a knight. You realize that all those years, you were fighting for land, for the king's land, for your lord's land. But you never truly understood what that meant. You didn't understand the sweat, the risk, and the profound, earthy connection that comes from living off a piece of ground. Now you do, and the simple meal of bread and cheese waiting for you inside tastes better for it. Years pass on your small fief. They are quiet years, measured by the turning of the seasons rather than by battles and campaigns. You are no longer a knight who farms, but a farmer who was once a knight. Your limp is more pronounced, your hands are permanently calloused, and your face is etched with the lines of sun and worry. Your life is simple, and for the first time it is truly your own. And just as you have settled into a predictable rhythm, the world begins to quietly change around you. The changes are small at first, filtering down to your remote corner of the kingdom through merchants, travelers, and the occasional decree from your old lord. And many of these changes, you notice, appear on your dinner table. One day, at the local market, you see a merchant selling something new: sugar. You've seen it before, of course, in the Lord's solar and in the hands of the wealthy spice merchant, where it was treated as a rare and exotic spice. But now it's here, in your small market town. It's still expensive, a luxury you can barely afford, but its very presence is a sign of a shifting world. The great sugar plantations in the Mediterranean and on newly discovered Atlantic islands are beginning to produce it in greater quantities, and it's slowly trickling down the social ladder. Your wife buys a tiny cone of it, and that evening she dusts it over some baked apples. The intense, pure sweetness is a shock, a completely new kind of flavor that feels both decadent and modern. Then come the new vegetables. A traveling friar, who stays a night at your farm, gives you a handful of seeds he acquired from a monastery known for its extensive gardens. He tells you they are a new, improved variety of carrot. Not the pale, thin, slightly bitter carrots you've always known, but a fatter, sweeter, and distinctly orange root. You plant them, and when you pull the first one from the earth, you are amazed by its vibrant color. When you taste it, roasted in the embers of your fire, its sweetness is a revelation. Here's a detail that often goes unnoticed. Many of the vegetables we consider staples are relatively modern additions to the European diet. The orange carrot, for example, was cultivated by the Dutch in the 16th and 17th centuries. Before that, carrots came in a variety of colors, including white, yellow, and purple. The slow, deliberate process of plant breeding, carried out in monastery gardens and on progressive farms, was gradually transforming the taste and nutritional content of the average person's diet. Other new things begin to appear. You hear talk of a strange, lumpy tuber from the New World called a potato, though most people are suspicious of it, thinking it's poisonous or causes disease. But other plants from across the sea are more readily accepted. New varieties of beans and squash start to be cultivated, adding variety and nutrition to the eternal pottage. Your diet, once a monotonous cycle of a few key ingredients, is slowly but surely expanding. It's not just new ingredients, but new techniques. You notice that the miller in the nearby town has a new kind of millstone that grinds finer flour. The local blacksmith has learned to make better, cheaper iron pots, which distribute heat more evenly and make cooking easier. These small technological improvements have a direct impact on the quality of your daily bread and stew. This period of slow, incremental change is a source of much debate among historians. When exactly did the medieval diet end and the early modern diet begin? There was no single event, no dramatic revolution. It was a gradual evolution, a slow broadening of the culinary horizons, driven by exploration, trade, and agricultural innovation. Some argue the fall of Constantinople in 1453, which disrupted the old spice routes and spurred the search for new ones, was a key turning point. Others point to the Columbian exchange, the transfer of plants, animals, and diseases between the old and new worlds after 1492. The truth is, it was all happening at once, a complex and overlapping series of events that you are witnessing from your small corner of the world. You are growing older, and you find yourself both embracing and resisting these changes. You love the sweetness of the new carrots, but you are suspicious of the newfangled ideas of the younger farmers. You find yourself telling them stories of the old ways, of the hardships you endured, of the taste of hardtack and salted fish. To them, it's ancient history. Their world is one of greater variety, greater abundance, and greater expectations. One evening, your eldest son, who now does most of the hard labor on the farm, comes home from the market with a small, precious citrus fruit, a lemon. It has traveled hundreds, perhaps thousands of miles to reach your table. He cuts a slice and squeezes a few drops into the water jug. You take a sip. The bright, sharp, acidic taste is a jolt to your senses. It's the taste of a world that is growing larger, more connected, and more full of surprising new flavors. You are a man of the old world, but you are getting to taste the very beginning of the new one, and it tastes like sunshine. The years continue their steady, relentless march. The seasons turn, each one a little harder on your old bones than the last. Your life on the farm is peaceful, but the legacy of your youth is written on your body. The terrible food you ate for decades, the food of the soldier in the night, is now presenting you with a final, non-negotiable bill. Your teeth are the first to protest. You've already lost several casualties of years of gnawing on rock-hard tack and dense, gritty bread. The ones that remain are worn down, sensitive, and prone to aching. Chewing tough meat or even a hard crust of bread is now a painful ordeal. You find yourself favoring soft food stews, pottages, and mashes, the very things you once despised. There is a cruel irony in the fact that your old man's diet is beginning to resemble the invalid's diet of your past. Your digestion, once capable of handling anything from spoiled meat to weevil-infested biscuits, is now a fickle and unreliable thing. The rich, fatty foods you occasionally enjoy at feast days now leave you feeling heavy and unwell for days afterward. Your body, after a lifetime of abuse, has lost its resilience. The old wound in your leg is a constant companion, a living barometer that predicts the weather with an accuracy that would make a scholar envious. It throbs with a dull, deep ache when rain is coming, and it stiffens painfully in the cold of winter. Your other joints have joined the chorus of complaint. Your knuckles are swollen, your knees creak like rusty hinges, and your back aches from decades of wearing armor and, later, from bending over in the fields. Here's a stark piece of paleopathological evidence. The skeletal remains of medieval knights and soldiers often show a high incidence of osteoarthritis, even in relatively young men. The sheer physical stress of their profession, the weight of the armor, the shock of combat, the long hours in the saddle took a tremendous toll on their joints. This, combined with a diet that was often deficient in essential vitamins and minerals, led to a lifetime of chronic pain for many who survived to old age. You sit by the fire in the evening, watching your grandchildren play. They are taller and healthier than you were at their age. Their diet, thanks to the new crops and a few good harvests, is more varied and nutritious than the one you grew up on. They will likely live longer, stronger lives. You feel a quiet satisfaction in this, the feeling that your struggles have paved the way for their better future, but you also feel a sense of distance from them. They cannot comprehend the world that shaped you. You try to tell them stories of your life as a knight, but to them it's like a fairy tale. They can't imagine a world where bread is a marker of status, where a pinch of pepper is a treasure, where you might have to eat your own shoes to survive a siege. The historical debate on the quality of life in the Middle Ages is a complex one. Was it a story of relentless progress, with each generation living slightly better than the last, or was it a cycle of booms and busts, with periods of relative health and prosperity followed by famine and plague? Looking at your own life, you see evidence for both. You have witnessed incredible hardship, but you are also ending your days in a world with more variety and opportunity than the one you were born into. You look at your hands, twisted and gnarled, but still strong enough to hold a cup. You think of all the things these hands have held: a sword, a lance, the reins of a war horse, a squire's polishing cloth, a pilgrim's staff, a bowl of thin gruel, a farmer's scythe. They are the hands of a survivor. Your wife brings you your dinner. It's a simple pottage of vegetables from your garden, with some of the new, sweet orange carrots in it. It's soft, warm, and easy on your old teeth. As you eat, you feel the familiar aches in your joints and the phantom taste of salt and hardtack on your tongue. Your body is a living archive of your culinary past. Every bite you ever took, from the dream feast of your youth to the grim rations of your campaigning days, has left its mark. You are, in the end, what you have eaten. And you have eaten a long and difficult life. The fire in the hearth has burned down to a pile of glowing orange embers. It pulses with a soft, gentle light, a warm and living heart in the center of the quiet house. You sit in your carved wooden chair, a heavy wool blanket draped over your knees. Outside, a winter wind howls, but in here, there is only peace. You are very old now. The world of battles and castles feels like a story someone else told you, a life lived by a different man. Your granddaughter, a young woman with your late wife's kind eyes, brings you your supper. She knows you don't eat much these days. It's a small bowl of thin vegetable pottage, made with winter root vegetables from the cellar and thickened with a little oat flour. It is warm, soft, and requires no effort from your tired jaw. She places it on the small table beside you, along with a wooden spoon, and kisses your wrinkled forehead before returning to the main room, leaving you to the quiet company of the fire. You lift the spoon with a slightly trembling hand. The smell is simple and clean. You take a mouthful, and as the warm, Bland liquid coats your tongue, the floodgates of your memory open. It's a sensation you've had many times in your later years. A single taste becomes a key, unlocking a lifetime of other tastes, other meals, other lives. The simple warmth of the pottage summons the ghost of 1,000 other bowls. You can almost taste the greasy, thin pottage of your first days as a page in the castle kitchen, the taste of servitude and ambition. Then comes the memory of the thick, salty peas pottage of your first nightly meal, the taste of profound disappointment. You can feel the grittins of the ache-ornfor soup from the long siege, the taste of desperation. And finally, the savory, leek and bacon stew from your brother's cottage, the taste of homecoming. You take another spoonful. This time, you can almost feel the phantom hardness of ship's biscuit against your gums, the faint taste of weevils in the sea. You remember the sting of cheap, sour ale and the welcome fire of strong wine at a victory feast. You can taste the oily, penitential flavor of Lenten herring and the overwhelming salt of a piece of preserved beef, chewed on a long, dusty march. For a fleeting second, you can even conjure the ghost of that spark, the shocking, electric heat of the black pepper you tasted once a lifetime ago. Here is the final, quiet truth of a long life. It is not recorded in great deeds, but in small sensations. The historians will write of your Lord's victories, of the King's crusade, of the great political shifts of the era. But they will never know the texture of the bread you ate, the weight of hunger in your belly, the sheer, animal relief of a full stomach after a battle. There's a long-standing historical debate about what constitutes a good life or a significant life. Is it the life of the king, the general, the bishop, whose decisions shape the course of nations, or is there equal significance in the life of the common man, the farmer, the soldier, whose name is lost to time but whose existence formed the bedrock of that world? You have been both an aimless cog and a man of some small status, and you know now that the songs and tapestries only tell one part of the story. They don't tell the story of the food. You look into the fire. The dream of the feast, the one that drove you your entire youth, seems so strange now. You chased it your whole life through mud and blood and fear. You tasted it a few glorious times, but it was never the point. The point was the hard bread. The point was the hard bread. The point was the hungry, desperate, unending, glorious struggle to simply get another meal. That was the substance of it all. That was what was real. Your bowl is empty. You feel a great weariness settle over you, but it's a peaceful, gentle weight. The fire is fading, its light growing softer. You close your eyes. The howling of the wind outside sounds distant, like the sea. You are warm. You are full. And you are home. The embers in the hearth pulse softly, one last time before collapsing into a gentle, uniform gray. The light in the room fades with them, leaving only the deep, quiet shadows of a house asleep. The ache in your bones seems to dissolve, the weight of a lifetime of armor and labor lifting from you, as if the wool blanket has become as light as a cloud. You are no longer tethered to the hard chair, to the cold stone floor. There is a sense of drifting now, a slow, easy current carrying you away from the shore of your long life. The tastes and smells that once defined your days, the sharp tang of salt, the soreness of cheap ale, the iron scent of blood and steel are all fading now. They are becoming soft, blurred echoes in the distance, like a song half remembered from a faraway room. The call of the hunting horn, the tolling of the chapel bell, the roar of a battle, all of it is smoothed away into a single, continuous, peaceful hum. A gentle silence descends, wrapping around you like the softest velvet. You feel a profound sense of release. The hunger is gone. The fear is gone. The endless, gnawing need that propelled you through the world has finally been satisfied. There are no more marches to endure, no more watches to stand, no more sieges to survive. The great, long feast and the equally long fast of your life have both come to their quiet conclusion. You are simply at rest, a feeling of deep, profound peace, A comfort more complete than any warm meal or soft bed cradles you. Let the current carry you. There is nothing left to fight, nothing left to want. There is only the soft, deep, dreamless dark. The end of the article. Good night.